He walked in wearing a faded black hoodie, slightly scuffed sneakers, and jeans that had clearly seen better days. His hands were tucked into his pockets, and his head was down, not because he lacked confidence, but because he was listening. Listening to how people judged him before they even knew his name. As soon as he stepped through the glass doors of the dealership, 3 salesmen looked over from their desks. One of them let out a soft chuckle, leaned toward the other, and whispered something. The second one smirked and shook his head, already looking back at his computer screen. But the third? He walked straight toward the newcomer with a clipboard in hand, but not to help him. His tone wasn't warm, it wasn't even neutral, it was cold and dismissive. "Sorry, sir, but we're not showing vehicles right now," he said, clearly lying. The man lifted his head slightly, making direct eye contact. "I just want to take a look," he replied calmly. The manager gave a tight smile. "We have a strict appointment policy. You can come back another day when you're properly scheduled. Or better yet, check out our inventory online." He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He just gave a small nod and walked past the rows of sparkling cars toward the far corner of the showroom. That was when the manager stepped in front of him, blocking his way. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave," he said. "We've had some issues here before." "Is that right?" the man replied, his voice steady. "What kind of issues?" The manager crossed his arms. "People wandering in, loitering, taking photos. You know, not really here to buy." That was all it took. The man smiled slightly, then turned around and started walking back toward the entrance. But just as he reached the doors, another man entered, a sharply dressed individual in a tailored gray suit, holding a leather briefcase and looking rushed. His face lit up the moment he saw the man in the hoodie. "There you are," he said. "Been looking all over. They said you were already here." The salesmen all turned their heads. The manager froze. "I thought I'd drop by early," the man in the hoodie replied casually. The man in the suit walked closer and offered a hand. "Glad you did. Everything's ready. The office upstairs has your paperwork prepped. The meeting with the operations team starts in 30. By now, every employee in the showroom was staring. The man in the hoodie turned to the manager who'd asked him to leave. "Is there a problem?" he asked. The manager's face was pale. I didn't realize you were—" The suited man interrupted. "This is Mr. Landon King. He owns this dealership, and 3 others in the state." The silence was deafening. The man who had just been told to leave stood there, calm, composed, and quiet. He didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice. He just looked at the manager, whose entire posture had shifted from confident to crumbling in seconds. But instead of speaking, Landon simply walked past him and headed toward the elevator. The rest of the staff scrambled, suddenly falling over themselves to be helpful. Coffee was offered. Apologies were mumbled. Smiles came out of nowhere. Upstairs, Landon sat at the long glass conference table with his regional operations director, the same man in the gray suit. As they went over quarterly numbers, staffing reports, and new branding plans, Landon paused, set the papers down, and looked his director in the eye. "Who hired the floor manager downstairs?" "I believe it was done before we acquired the branch," the director answered. "He stayed on after the buyout." "Fire him," Landon said flatly. "Today." The director blinked. "Do you want to talk to him first?" "No." Landon stood up, walked to the window, and looked down at the showroom floor. The same manager was now nervously pacing and glancing up every few seconds. "He judged me in 5 seconds, Landon said. "Didn't ask my name, didn't offer help, just decided I didn't belong. If that's how he sees people who don't look the way he thinks they should, then he's not selling cars. He's pushing people away. The director gave a nod and pulled out his phone. Meanwhile, on the showroom floor, the manager had just stepped outside to get some air when his phone buzzed. He picked it up quickly. As he listened, his face turned red, then white. His shoulders slumped, and within minutes, he was gone. But that wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. Because Landon wasn't just cleaning house. He was about to make a change across every dealership he owned. And it started with one simple idea. No one gets judged by their shoes, their skin, or their silence. Landon's reputation wasn't built on his net worth or how many dealerships he owned. It was built on one core belief: people matter. Not just customers with high credit scores or designer clothes, but every person who walks through the door, whether they come in wearing a Rolex or a $10 hoodie. After the manager was let go, Landon didn't make a big announcement. He didn't post it on social media or hold a staff meeting to publicly shame anyone. He believed in quiet corrections that left lasting impressions. But behind the scenes, he got to work immediately. That same week, he called a meeting with the leadership teams from all 4 of his dealerships. It wasn't the usual quarterly report. There were no spreadsheets, no projected earnings on a PowerPoint. This time, he started with a question. How many of you know what it feels like to be treated like you don't belong? He asked. The room was silent. A few exchanged glances, unsure where this was headed. Because that's what we just did, he continued. We treated someone like they were nothing. And I want to make sure that never happens again. Not here. Not anywhere we operate. He paused for a second. We're going to train differently. We're going to hire differently. And we're going to serve every customer like they already own the building. Because from today forward, we stop selling cars. We start building relationships. Some nodded. A few were still quiet. But the message was clear. This wasn't optional. Later that day, Landon visited another branch. It was one of the top-performing stores on paper but had been getting a few complaints lately, mostly from customers who said they felt ignored or brushed off. He didn't schedule the visit. He didn't wear a suit. He showed up the same way he did before. Hoodie, sneakers, no entourage. This time, the greeting was different. A young woman near the service desk stood up with a smile and asked, "Can I help you today?" Landon nodded. "Just looking." "Take your time," she said. "If you need anything, I'm right here." He walked around the lot, stopping at a few cars, reading the window stickers, and watching how the team worked. There was a natural flow to the place. Less pushy, more patient. When he returned to the front desk, the same woman greeted him again. "You have a great team here," he said. "Thank you. I'm still new, but they've been really welcoming." "What's your name?" he asked. "Danielle." "You like working here?" "I do," she replied. "It's different than my last job. People here care. It's not just about selling stuff. They actually listen to customers." Landon gave her a nod of approval. Before leaving, he called over the branch manager privately and let him know what Danielle had said. "She's only been here 2 weeks," the manager told him, "but she's already gotten more customer compliments than anyone else this month." "Promote her," Landon said. "She sees people." That same week, he launched an internal review across all locations, not to punish anyone, but to better understand how teams interacted with their customers. He worked with a few trusted advisors to design a new training system called First Contact, where employees were shown real examples of how unconscious bias can show up in everyday conversations. It was mandatory. No exceptions. At the same time, Landon quietly began offering new incentives for teams who focused on customer experience over monthly sales numbers. The idea wasn't just to sell vehicles. It was to build trust, loyalty, and respect in every interaction. But not everyone was on board. A few longtime sales managers pushed back. One in particular, Troy from the Clearwater location, had been with the dealership before Landon ever bought it. He was loud, confident, and known for making big commissions. He didn't like the new training program. He didn't like the shift in focus. And he definitely didn't like the idea of being soft with customers. "This isn't a charity," Troy said during a team call. "You want to hold hands and talk feelings, go open a counseling center. We're here to sell cars." Landon didn't react emotionally. He listened. Then he responded with just one sentence. "Let's talk in person." The following Monday, Landon arrived at the Clearwater dealership unannounced, again dressed casually. Troy didn't recognize him at first. He assumed he was just another walk-in. "Hey, you lost?" Troy asked as Landon entered the building. "No," Landon said, walking slowly toward him. "I'm right where I need to be." It wasn't until the general manager came out and greeted Landon by name that Troy's expression changed. The color drained from his face, and just like that, the tension in the room thickened. "Let's talk," Landon said, gesturing toward a nearby office. Inside, the conversation wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was surgical. Landon laid out every reason why the culture shift was necessary. How judging people based on looks, speech, or perceived worth had cost them good customers and better employees. He shared stories, he showed data, and then he looked Troy in the eye. "This isn't about feelings," he said. "It's about values. If we're not aligned, then maybe this isn't the right place for you." Troy sat there, arms crossed, silent for a long moment. Then, in a quieter voice, he said, "I built a lot of this." Landon nodded. "And I respect that. But this company's not staying the same. It's moving forward. You can move with it or move on." That night, Troy turned in his resignation. The next day, Landon held a team meeting and promoted one of the most respectful, people-first sales reps to Troy's position, a guy named Julian, who'd once closed a deal by spending 2 hours walking a customer through financing options without ever once mentioning commission. By the end of the month, customer satisfaction scores across all 4 dealerships had jumped. Complaints dropped. Reviews online were filled with stories of people being treated kindly, even if they didn't buy a car that day. Landon kept a low profile through all of it. No public statements, no interviews. But word got around, people talked, customers returned, and stories of his silent walkthroughs, hoodie, sneakers, and all, started circulating in employee break rooms and group chats. But the real shift came when someone shared their own story online. A man named Quincy who'd been denied a test drive at another dealership weeks earlier, only to walk into Landon's showroom and be treated with dignity from the moment he stepped in. His post went viral, and then something unexpected happened. Landon received a message from someone he hadn't heard from in a long time, someone who remembered him not as a CEO, but as a teenager working the night shift at a gas station just to help his mom make rent. Someone who knew exactly what it felt like to be invisible. And that message? It wasn't just a trip down memory lane. It was going to change everything. The message came late at night. Landon was at home, sitting on the balcony with his laptop closed, just sipping tea and unwinding. It buzzed through on his phone with a simple notification. "Hey, Landon. I don't know if you remember me, but I remember you." There was no photo, just a name. Rico Benton. Landon hadn't seen or heard that name in over 20 years, but he remembered it instantly. Rico wasn't just a memory, he was a chapter. They had grown up on the same street, shared the same cracked sidewalks, the same boxed lunches, and the same after-school struggles. But unlike Landon, who kept his head down and pushed through school, Rico had drifted early. First it was truancy, then bad company, and eventually trouble that left a permanent mark on his record. Landon's thumbs hovered over his screen for a long moment. He opened the message and read on. I saw a video online, said your name, showed you standing in a dealership. Man, I almost dropped my phone. Couldn't believe it was you. I don't want anything. I'm not asking for favors. Just wanted you to know that I saw you, and I'm proud of you. Real proud. I'm trying to get my life straight now. Working part-time in a garage, taking care of my niece during the week. Seeing you out there doing it the way you are gave me a reason not to quit. That's all. Just thanks. Landon sat still. Of all the messages he'd received over the past few weeks, reporters, clients, congratulatory notes from big-name executives, this one hit differently. He typed back a single sentence. Send me your number. They spoke the next morning. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't dramatic. It was just real. Two people who used to share street corners and school lunches talking like time hadn't put them in completely different galaxies. Rico didn't waste time trying to pitch himself. He admitted what he'd been through. No filters, no excuses. He talked about the nights he'd spent couch surfing, the warehouse jobs that dried up, the look on his niece's face the first time he bought her school supplies with his own money. Landon listened the whole time. Then he asked, Do you still work with engines? Every day, Rico said. Engines, brakes, suspension, you name it. Mostly used stuff, but yeah, I get by. Landon didn't make any promises. But 2 weeks later, he had Rico interview for a service technician apprentice program at one of his dealerships. Not a handout, not a shortcut. Just a seat at the table. Rico showed up early. No gold watch, no fresh fade, just steel-toe boots, worn jeans, and focus in his eyes. The lead mechanic who ran the interview pulled Landon aside afterward and said, He's rough around the edges, but he knows his stuff. Give him 3 months, Landon said. Then tell me if he's still rough. While that door quietly opened, Landon kept building his vision. He launched a new customer initiative called Open Drive, where each location partnered with local schools and community centers to host once-a-month educational workshops. Not about car buying, but about credit, vehicle maintenance, job prep, and soft skills. Real tools for real lives. The first session was light. Only 10 people showed up. The second brought 35. By the 4th month, over 100 chairs were filled and local press started showing up. It wasn't just about fixing what happened in that dealership weeks ago. Landon was reshaping how the business thought. Still, not everyone was happy. Word had gotten out that a former convict, Rico, was now working at one of Landon's shops. A few anonymous complaints rolled in. One was from a vendor. Another came from a high-profile customer who threatened to pull their account. Landon didn't blink. He pulled up every performance report Rico had clocked in those first 6 weeks. Early shifts, completed jobs, 0 customer complaints, and 2 co-workers who'd asked if he could train them on older model repairs. Then he sent a memo to all managers. We don't judge people by where they came from. We judge them by how they show up. Rico is showing up. Let's move forward. That same week, something unexpected happened again. A journalist from a major business publication reached out, asking for an interview. They had heard about the viral dealership moment, but what caught their attention was everything that happened after. Landon declined. He didn't want the spotlight. He wasn't trying to be a face on a magazine. His focus was on the people, on building places where the underlooked felt seen and where the unseen could rise. But while he kept ducking the limelight, something was shifting. Customers were driving from 2, sometimes 3 towns over just to experience the kind of service they were hearing about online. Mechanics started referring their friends to apply. Even former critics, folks who once rolled their eyes at the values talk, started taking a second look. One of them was Trina, a seasoned sales rep who had been with the company for nearly a decade. When the culture shift began, she was skeptical, quietly resistant, thought it was just a phase. But then one afternoon, she served a quiet woman who walked in looking nervous and out of place. The woman didn't speak much English. She pointed to a used SUV and said only, "For my family." Trina remembered Landon's words. Treat every customer like they already own the building. So she did. She walked the woman through every step with patience, pulled up translation apps when needed, and even had a colleague from another branch step in to help explain financing in her native language. The sale closed. A week later, Trina got a handwritten thank you card in the mail. Inside it was a photo of the woman and her 3 sons, smiling beside the SUV. It changed something in her. Trina pulled Landon aside the next day. "You were right," she said. "It's not about selling cars." "It never was," Landon replied. Meanwhile, Rico kept showing up. Early, consistent, humble. One Friday afternoon, the lead technician brought Landon into the shop and showed him something on paper. "Look at this," he said. "Rico's repairs are clocked faster than the average tech with 2 years under their belt. His attention to detail is off the charts." Landon nodded. "Promote him. He's only been here 3 months, and he's earned every minute of it." Rico was moved into a full-time position. He didn't cry, didn't jump around, didn't make a speech, just shook Landon's hand and said, "Thank you for letting me prove myself." "You did that all on your own," Landon said. But just as things were finding rhythm, a new problem was brewing. An executive from a rival dealership chain had been quietly watching Landon's rise, watching the viral story, watching the customer surge, and they didn't like it one bit. They didn't just want to compete, they wanted to buy him out. And when Landon politely declined their offer, they came back with something else, a threat. Not just to his business, but to the very people who now depended on him. The message wasn't subtle. A formal letter, hand-delivered to Landon's office by a courier. No company branding. Just a typed note on crisp white paper, sealed in a black envelope. "Decline our offer again, and we'll make sure your people feel the heat. We know who you're hiring. We know what you're building. We can tear it all down. Quietly. Think twice." There was no name, but Landon already knew where it came from. Victor Hensley, CEO of one of the largest, most politically connected dealership chains in the state. A man who didn't lose, especially not to someone like Landon. Victor wasn't angry that Landon had turned down the buyout offer. He was furious because Landon had done the one thing money couldn't control. He'd changed the narrative. Customers were going out of their way to buy from a place where integrity mattered. The press was starting to highlight Landon's community programs. Even a few of Victor's former clients had switched sides, citing better service and transparency. Victor didn't want to buy Landon's dealerships to improve them. He wanted to shut them down before they rewrote the rulebook. Landon sat in silence for a long time, reading that letter again and again. His first instinct was to go public, but then he paused. He didn't need to shout. He needed to move, strategically, decisively, and with the same strength that had brought him here. The next morning, he gathered his senior leadership, people who had been loyal through the hardest days, and shared the letter with them. Not one person flinched. "We've built this together," Landon said. "I'm not giving it away, but I'm not putting anyone at risk either. So here's what we're going to do." Phase 1 was tightening up every vulnerability. Landon brought in cybersecurity specialists to audit their systems. He reviewed every vendor contract, reassessed operational bottlenecks, and ensured all HR protocols were above board and fortified. Then came Phase 2, expansion. Quiet, fast, and effective. Landon opened talks with a struggling dealership outside the city, one with good bones but poor management. In 30 days, he closed the acquisition, rebranded the location, and restaffed it with a mix of veteran talent and eager newcomers, including 2 people who had once been rejected by Victor's company for not having the right background. Word got out fast. Customers showed up the first weekend in droves. Victor saw the numbers shift, and he panicked. In response, he launched a campaign, anonymous articles, smear ads on smaller social media pages, disguised reviews questioning Landon's hiring practices, calling his approach reckless, too sympathetic, too personal. Landon didn't fire back publicly. Instead, he hosted a press event, but not for a rebuttal. He invited every technician, advisor, manager, and service rep from all of his locations. They came in branded polos, clean and sharp, some nervous, others confident. And they stood behind him, not as props, but as proof. Landon stood at the podium and said, "We don't build success by stepping on people. We build it by investing in them. Some said hiring second-chance employees would ruin us. We're still here, thriving. Some said putting customers before profits was unrealistic. Our numbers say otherwise. I didn't inherit this business. I built it, brick by brick, lesson by lesson, and I won't be bullied out of it, not by anyone." The video went viral, again. But this time, it wasn't a confrontation. It was a declaration. Behind the scenes, Victor tried harder. He sent people to dig into Rico's past, to find anything that could be used against Landon's name. But Rico had kept his record clean, not one slip, and those who worked with him only had good things to say. Then Victor crossed a line. One afternoon, a regulatory complaint was filed against Landon's main dealership, accusing it of manipulating loan documents. Inspectors showed up unannounced. Files were seized. Customers were questioned. The story started to pick up steam online, but what Victor didn't expect was that Landon had already prepared. Weeks before, Landon had hired a third-party auditor to quietly run quarterly reviews on all financial paperwork. When the allegations hit, Landon simply handed over the full audit, signed, sealed, and clean. The inspection ended the same day it started. What followed was unexpected. One of Victor's own employees, an internal compliance officer, reached out anonymously to a journalist. They exposed the campaign Victor had orchestrated. The fake reviews, the threats, the regulatory traps. It made headlines. Victor's empire didn't collapse overnight, but cracks began to show. Board members started asking questions. Partners backed out of deals. 2 of his franchise branches ended their agreements and signed over to Landon's network instead. Landon didn't celebrate. He just went back to work. And the people around him noticed. Because while the industry fought with shadows, he kept building with light. Trina, who had once doubted the new direction, was now leading regional sales trainings. Rico had been promoted again. this time to team lead in the service department, mentoring younger hires. And Landon? He never forgot how it all started. One evening, he walked into the same dealership where he was once denied. It had been restructured under his leadership but kept the same architecture. He stood by the reception desk as a woman walked in. She wore a plain coat, looked uncertain, and held a small folder of documents. The new receptionist stood to greet her and smiled. "How can I help you today?" The woman hesitated. I don't know if I'm in the right place." The receptionist smiled again. "If you're looking to be treated with respect, you definitely are." Landon watched quietly. That was all he needed to hear. The system hadn't changed him. He had changed the system. Not with revenge, not with outrage, with consistency, with vision, and most of all, with people. The kind no one thought twice about until he made sure they had the mic, the opportunity, and the respect they always deserved. And that was how a man once denied at his own dealership became the name no one could ignore.